when you talk about the sort of the hierarchy of needs, of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is how I frame it from my field of, maybe people who are poor don't really have the luxury to take into account environmental issues. In South Africa, I see that all the time, where there's quite a split, and it does seem to divide along lines of race, but for me it has always been more poverty, extreme poverty. And I live in a very beautiful area, and you will see that these informal settlements will, townships is what they used to call them,
right.
will spring up and just devastate lots of indigenous forest, and we'll go climb over the whole hill and down.
Right.
Because it's just thousands of people living in boxes, and
Yes.
and it's quite moving, on one level, on a psychological and sociological level. But then you also see what it's doing to Mother Earth, and it's kind of hard. And we, as you say, there's these multiple perspectives, many faceted, and the different altitudes.
Right. Well, that's why many people argue that growing the world's wealth is a key to dealing with some environmental problems, or at least making more people aware of them. But the process of gaining wealth causes environmental problems. So
Also,
it's a tricky,
very interesting.
it's very tricky, that we're in a tricky situation. I don't think it's unsolvable, but it's going to be interesting this century, seeing how we work this out.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. I was really interested in the first excerpt that you're talking about. You emphasized or focused on that we're not in Gaia, she is in us. I think that was a quote from you. Could you just say something about that?
Well, that's a really complicated idea, and it took me a long time. I had to really think about this. I sometimes I think that people, when they're approaching an issue like this, think they should just be able to read it and get it.
Yeah.
Well, they're a lot smarter than I am if they can do that. I had to spend hours on this, and really wrestling with what Wilbur had in mind by this. But I think it's something. One way of talking about it would be like this: so often we see these charts or diagrams, which show you have molecules and little organisms, and then plants and animals, and then humans, and then you have the biosphere or Gaia.
Yeah.
And so in terms of that hierarchy, we are included in Gaia. We are inside of Gaia. Now, there is some truth to that. If we consider ourselves strictly as organisms, we are in some sense included in Gaia as an organic system. There's no question about that. But if we leave it at that, we neglect the noetic or conscious aspect of ourselves, and that does not include it in Gaia in the same way that our skin is, or our physical terrain that we've built and so on. Those are all part of the physical and biological Earth system in some way. But our consciousness as a species, that is not inside of Gaia in the way that other aspects of us are inside of Gaia. The fact that we can represent Gaia to ourselves, conceive of it, describe it, worry about it, witnesses, this completely changes the situation. I mean, horses, one-celled organisms cannot represent the fact that there is anything like Gaia. Now, a lot of environmentalists worry about how I'm talking now, because they say, well, now you're being anthropocentric. And I respect the worry, because there's a lot that's been done in the name of the human name, which has been problematic. But, in a way, we can't help, first of all, being anthropocentric, since we're anthropos, we're humans.
Right, it's our perspective, right?
It's how we operate. But also, it's our gift and our obligation to use the conscious capacity that we've been given, we didn't ask for it, to understand what we are doing to the planet, what we could do otherwise,
Right.
and to appreciate the beauty and spectacle of not only planet Earth but the universe we're inside of. Well, in some sense we're inside of it, and in another sense the universe is inside of us, understood as a physical system. But this is, I find,
That's the harder part, I think, for us.
it is very tricky to get. Well, of course, if you go with the notion of levels, you have the physiosphere, the biosphere, and the noosphere. The biosphere is contained inside the noosphere, but insofar as we're conscious of it, but we're dependent on the biosphere.
Right.
The brain, mind, can't operate without the foundation of all the life forms on the planet, which we evolved from, and the physical systems that support them. Right. So saying that Gaia is inside of us is in a way kind of provocative.
Yes.
Because in a sense we are also inside Gaia as organisms.
And I think you mentioned about it being tetra-arising, or where we're co-arising, or we're at equal levels, I think.
Right. Well, everything, the social and biological systems necessary for our existence arise with us, and if they go away, so do we.
Right.
And that's the reason environmental issues are so important.
Yeah.
We can't survive and do our cool, fun human things without a functioning biosphere.
Well, that's really something to think about, isn't it? I guess in that, you also spoke about, and we don't have to get into this too much, but there are the holons and the holonic perspective of evolution and the 20 tenets and stuff. I just, one question that, as you were speaking, that came up for me, I understand social holons and I understand individual holons, which we've talked about as a class already. But I guess in terms of the biosphere and Gaia itself, it doesn't fit in there, does it? I mean, so we don't transcend and include the physiosphere. It obviously our body has that upper right component.
We do transcend and include it.
Do we?
Right.
All of Gaia? That's the part I'm trying
well,
to...
but in what sense? All right. Now, the tricky part is to get that the foundation, the physical foundation, is really crucial. And so is the biospheric level. Very important. Without them, we couldn't couldn't be humans.
We couldn't exist.
We couldn't exist. But which has greater depth?
Right.
Molecules in motion, in chemicals that form rocks, and even rocks move a little bit inside there. It's not very interesting. It's foundational. It's vital. But it's not very interesting. Now, things get interesting when you get life showing up. And then when you get self-conscious life, when you have a serious noosphere like humans and maybe some higher, who knows about dolphins and whales and elephants? I mean, maybe they're close to this too. But then you have you've moved beyond the limitations of the strictly biological level. And now, that's just, if Ken's right, and I think what Ken says is backed up by a lot of other people, that we transcend and include the biosphere.